Michael pressed his eye against the cold steel scope, the edges of the sight framing a scene that turned his stomach heavy as stone. The reticle locked on the figure of a man holding a trembling child, the terrorist's finger curling slowly on the trigger of his rifle, pressing it against the head of a girl no older than 8. The child's face was smeared with dirt and streaks of tears, her small body pressed hard against the concrete slab that offered no escape. Her lips quivered as though she were whispering to some unseen guardian, and near her lay the motionless form of her mother, blood dark against the cracked floor. Her attempt to shield her daughter had ended with the crushing blow of a rifle stock, leaving her silent and still in the cold air. Michael breathed into his radio, his voice as steady as discipline could make it. "Command, we have less than half a minute before he executes the hostage." His words were measured, but the storm behind his calm eyes betrayed him. The man he aimed at was known to them as Victor, once a soldier trained in ruthless survival, now turned mercenary. His voice echoed through the ruined factory, ranting in broken English about betrayal and vengeance. His eyes were wide, filled with the frantic light of someone who no longer saw life as worth living. Michael had seen that look before in the field. He knew that kind of man never surrendered. He only dragged others down into his ending. Beside Michael lay Robert, his spotter, crouched low with his rangefinder and ballistic calculator. Robert's face was pale in the winter cold, his lips tight as he muttered numbers under his breath. Wind speed 15 to 20 knots, shifting every half minute. Distance 1,847 meters. He wiped sweat from his brow, though the December air bit like knives. Michael adjusted his scope again, his gloved fingers tracing over steel, searching for an angle that simply did not exist. The factory sat low in the valley between two ridges, a wind tunnel that twisted the currents into chaos. And Victor had wedged himself behind a concrete loading dock, leaving only the slightest sliver of his head and shoulder visible when he leaned out to shout his madness. Robert shook his head. Even if everything lined up, this would still be a prayer of a shot. 1 degree wrong, and the girl is gone. 2 degrees wrong, and the bullet misses entirely, and he kills her out of spite. His voice carried the weight of calculation and hopelessness. Through his earpiece, Michael heard the commander's voice tighten. "Overwatch, we need a solution. Negotiation is collapsing. If he escalates further, he will begin shooting hostages. You have 2 minutes at most." Michael felt the crushing reality settle on him again. The impossible weight of decisions that no training could truly prepare a man for. In 15 years of carrying a rifle in service, he had made shots others called miracles. But this was not a miracle being asked of him. This was bending the rules of nature itself. And on the other side of the scope was a child who still believed someone could save her. The wind howled over the hills, tugging at his hair and scraping across the valley with sirens in the distance. News crews had gathered at the perimeter, their cameras pointing to the fortress of despair where life and death teetered on the trigger of a man unhinged. Michael whispered toward Robert, "What if we wait for the wind?" But Robert's answer was swift. "It is only getting worse. A storm is coming from the west." He spoke like a man delivering a sentence already written. Below them, Victor dragged the girl up by her hair. Her cry carried across the valley like a knife. Her father was bound nearby, straining against his ropes so hard that his wrists bled. His muffled shouts broke against the walls, a sound of fury and despair that Michael had heard from men on battlefields when the end closed in. Michael pressed deeper into the scope, his trigger finger quivering as if pulled by the weight of conscience rather than command. His heartbeat roared in his ears, drowning out the whirling gusts. 30 seconds, maybe less, Robert muttered beside him, his own eye locked to the spotting scope. I can read it in his body. He is working himself into the final act. Michael's breath misted against the cold metal, the reticle tightening on the impossible target, and then it happened. The child's wide eyes lifted as if searching across the void, and for a fleeting instant Michael swore she was looking at him, her gaze carrying faith, the pure and cruel trust of a child who believed someone, somewhere, would come. And then in that breath of eternity, crimson mist erupted from the head of Victor. His body collapsed like a puppet with its strings cut, his weapon clattering harmless against the concrete. The girl stumbled free. Robert's voice cracked with disbelief, his hands shaking so hard the spotting scope trembled. What just happened? The shot was perfect, impossibly perfect. The man who moments before was on the edge of executing a child now lay motionless, his blood spreading across the concrete. His death had come with no warning, no muzzle flash, no echo of a distant rifle, no thunder of justice from the hills. It was as if death itself had reached across distance and struck without sound. Michael's chest tightened, his hands trembling as he pulled back from the scope. One moment the man had been alive, the next he was gone, and not by his hand. Robert kept sweeping the horizon, eyes wide with panic. I saw nothing, no movement, no light. The bullet came out of nowhere. Michael, it is like it was born in the air itself. Command roared in their ears, demanding reports. But Michael's words came like ice. Command target is down. Hostages appear secured. But we did not fire. I repeat, we did not fire. The silence that followed was heavier than the storm clouds above. The nightmare had ended, but it had ended in a way that defied the very rules of their world. The valley was alive with chaos, sirens wailing in the distance, the strobe of police lights cutting through the fog of evening. Medics pushed through the cordon toward the factory, their silhouettes blurred against the haze. The freed child stumbled into her father's arms, his ropes now cut by the first wave of tactical officers. He clutched her to his chest with such force that it seemed he feared she might vanish if he let go. His sobs echoed louder than the helicopters circling overhead. Michael remained prone, his rifle unmoving, the weight of disbelief pressing against his chest. His pulse had not slowed. If anything, it was faster now, beating like a drum that refused to quiet. He had watched countless men die through his scope, but never like this, never by a phantom's hand. Robert's voice stammered beside him. Michael, I saw nothing, no reflection, no flash, no silhouette. It is like the bullet bent reality itself. His words tumbled out, shaky, as if naming the impossible made it heavier. Michael swept his scope east, then west, then north toward the abandoned construction site sprawled across the ridgeline. Steel beams cut into the sky, cranes frozen in silence. The skeletal husks of buildings looming like monuments of half-finished dreams. The area had been cleared earlier, no heat signatures, no known access. Yet the path of the bullet whispered otherwise. Command erupted again through the earpiece. Overwatch confirm. Did you or your team engage? Michael repeated his truth. Negative command. Target eliminated by unknown shooter. The radios filled with static and disbelief. Orders barked. Units scrambled. Yet no clarity arrived. Forensics teams were already moving in, their vans like pale ghosts along the perimeter. Michael lowered his rifle at last. Though his eyes never left the distant steel structures, a cold certainty crept over him. Whoever had pulled that trigger was not gone by chance. They were unseen by choice. Hours dragged as the factory swarmed with investigators. The body of Victor lay sprawled across the concrete, blood painting the floor where his head had erupted. Agents circled, photographing, measuring, lifting fragments. Yet one detail gnawed at them all. The bullet was too clean. Emma, the lead ballistics expert, held it aloft with tweezers, her hands trembling despite her reputation for composure. Copper jacket intact. No warping, no tumbling. It had traveled nearly 2 kilometers, pierced bone, yet remained pristine. She muttered numbers, the trajectory, the path, the angle, each calculation returning the same conclusion. It should not have been possible. Michael listened in silence as Emma explained to the gathered officers. The bullet entered at a line that would have required passage through layers of concrete. But there is no evidence of deflection. It held velocity like a force untouched by wind or drag. No known rifle, no known physics could account for this. Robert exchanged a glance with Michael. His eyes reflected the same fear Michael felt. Not fear of the enemy, but something deeper, the fear that the world no longer played by the rules they thought unbreakable. A detective named Sophia joined the circle, a small tablet in her hands. She pulled up grainy footage from a traffic camera overlooking the ridge. The video flickered black and white, static crawling across its edges. The construction crane loomed in the distance, its cabin empty. Then at precisely 3:47 and 23 seconds, a distortion shimmered through the screen, a flicker like heat above asphalt. It lasted 1 frame, then vanished. 3 seconds later, Victor's head burst. Apart on the factory floor. Michael leaned closer, his breath shallow. Run it again. Sophia replayed the footage. Each time the distortion repeated. No light, no weapon, only the brief shimmer of something unreal. Robert's voice came low. What if we were looking at it wrong? What if the shooter was not in the cab, but on the arm of the crane, one of the maintenance platforms the angle could align? Emma shook her head. The physics still fail. The barriers around Victor created what we call a ballistic shadow, an area protected from all direct fire. No bullet could have reached him from there without curving like water flowing around stone. The group fell into silence, the kind of silence that presses against the bones, when professionals realize their expertise is useless. Dr. John, a consulting physicist brought in by the Bureau, finally broke it. His laptop glowed faint blue in the dim factory light. I modeled every possibility, every correction for gravity, wind, even planetary rotation. He paused, his hand shaking slightly as he rubbed his glasses. The result is clear. There is no natural trajectory that fits. According to everything we know about physics, this shot never happened. Michael closed his eyes. Yet the image remained burned within. He had seen it happen. He had felt it happen. But the world's laws now called him a liar. The forensics team carried on, scanning, measuring. Their lights swept over the gray ruins. But the place offered no answers, only questions that grew darker with each discovery. Later that night, Michael found himself climbing the crane ladder despite warnings from safety officials. Each rung groaned beneath his weight, the winter wind slicing at his face. At the top, the view stretched across the valley, the lights of the city flickering like stars against the earth. From here he saw the factory, the barricades, the path where death had arrived unseen. And yet from this height, the barriers completely hid Victor's position. No line of sight existed. That was when his eyes caught it, wedged between steel plates in the operator's cab, a folded piece of paper. Tucked carefully, his fingers trembled as he pulled it free. The paper bore coordinates written in meticulous hand, numbers precise and unwavering. They pointed to an abandoned warehouse 15 miles outside the city. 2 hours later, tactical units breached the warehouse. Inside, they found only emptiness, dust, and a single spent casing, a round of .338 Magnum, the exact match to the bullet lodged in Victor's skull. The casing was still warm, a cruel impossibility. Etched into the concrete floor beside it, burned deep as though by acid or laser, were words that sent a chill across every spine in the room. Some shots transcend distance, some justice transcends time. Michael stared until his vision blurred, his heart heavy, his mind spiraling. Whoever had fired that shot was not only real, but wanted them to know. And the message they left was clear. The rules of the world no longer held dominion over them. The warehouse echoed with emptiness, each footstep of the tactical team stirring dust that had not moved in years. Yet on the cracked floor rested proof of something far beyond their understanding. The casing gleamed under the flashlight beams, still carrying warmth as if fired only moments before, a cruel defiance of distance and time. Michael crouched beside it, the brass catching faint light. His gloved fingers traced the burned inscription on the concrete floor, the words seared as though carved by fire itself. Some shots transcend distance. Some justice transcends time. His breath caught, for this was not the rant of a madman. It was deliberate, precise, purposeful. Robert scanned the room, his weapon steady though his eyes betrayed unease. Nothing else. No sign of equipment. No residue of powder or weapon oil. No impressions of boots in the dust. Whoever had stood here had vanished without leaving a single trace, except the one they wanted found. Emma arrived moments later, her face pale as the team led her to the casing. She lifted it gently, her instruments confirming what her instincts already screamed. It matched perfectly to the bullet retrieved from Victor's body. The round had been fired from this very warehouse. Yet no physical reality could reconcile that fact with the death that had unfolded miles away. John joined them, laptop balanced against his arm. He shook his head before anyone even asked. If a round traveled from here to that factory, it would have crossed farmland and structures, and there was no line of sight. Physics rejects it outright. The casing is undeniable, but the path is impossible. Michael stared at the words, scorched into the floor. The letters were clean, uniform, etched with technology far beyond welding or engraving. He felt as though someone had reached out from the shadows and pressed a message directly into his mind. The days that followed were consumed by reports, endless questions, and silence that no one wanted to put into words. Official files stripped away the unexplainable, reducing it to clinical lines of text. Unknown shooter, neutralized target from undetermined position. The mystery erased by bureaucracy, but not from Michael's mind. He could not sleep. His dreams bent into twisted corridors where bullets curved like serpents through the air, striking their prey with precision no man could achieve. Shadows drifted across geometry that bent in impossible angles. And in those dreams, Michael always felt the weight of eyes upon him, unseen yet deeply present. He woke each night soaked in sweat, his sheets clinging like chains. Robert fared little better. He buried himself in rechecking calculations, as though repetition could undo what they had witnessed. Again and again he entered variables, wind speeds, distances, atmospheric data. Each time the results came back void. No path, no chance, probability absolute zero. Yet the child lived, and Victor was dead. Proof stared at them in the form of a spent casing and bloodied concrete. Emma attempted to ground herself in science. She replayed the security footage, slowing it frame by frame. The distortion remained, a shimmer in the air, a ripple like heat over asphalt, lasting a fraction of a second. And then silence, then the impossible. Sophia, the detective, pressed further, digging into Victor's history, trying to find connections, hidden accomplices, shadowy backers. Yet every road ended in the same place. Victor was a man who had come to die, a man with no allies left. No group claimed responsibility for the mysterious shot. No whisper of underground factions reached their ears. Michael grew restless. He returned to the crane more than once, climbing its skeletal frame in search of something overlooked. Each time he found only the folded paper's absence, the wind cutting sharp, and the silence of rusted steel. Yet he felt watched. Each climb pressed the cold certainty deeper into him. Someone had been there. Someone could still be near. Weeks passed. The official report was closed, sealed with the stamp of completion, though every agent involved knew the case was anything but files filed away, as though paper could bind the unexplainable. Michael sat one evening in his apartment. The case file spread across the table before him, pages like broken shards of a puzzle that refused to fit. He turned the spent casing over in his hand, the last piece of evidence he had never reported. The brass caught the dim light of his lamp, accusing him with its weight. It pulsed with questions he could not answer. The nightmares worsened, bullets slicing across skies that bent and warped, shadows weaving between seconds as though time itself were clay in their hands. He woke choking on the taste of iron, the echo of gunfire still ringing in his ears. His phone buzzed against the table, a new message, the number unlisted. The words were sharp, short, undeniable. Rooftop now, bring the casing, come alone. Michael stared at the screen, his heart thundered in his chest. Instinct screaming at him to ignore it. Call command, burn the phone. Yet something deeper, older than instinct, pulled him toward it. He could not let it go. He could not let the question remain silent. He armed himself, slipped the casing into his pocket, and climbed the narrow stairwell to the rooftop. The December wind cut into him like knives, the city lights below shivering in 1,000 fractured reflections. And there she stood, a silhouette against the skyline, her figure slender and sharp, more shadow than flesh. Her presence radiated not menace, but certainty, a predator at rest, calm yet ready to strike. Michael froze, his breath caught in his throat. The woman did not turn at first, but when she did, her eyes burned like wells of memory, as though she carried within them the weight of countless shots, countless deaths, Countless distances spanned with impossible precision. He felt the world shift then, as if the rooftop were no longer part of the city, as if he had stepped into the very distortion he had seen on the footage. Time thickened, the air heavier, reality bent under the presence of someone who should not exist. The casing in his pocket grew heavier still, pressing against him as if it too recognized its maker. And Michael knew then, before she even spoke, that the answers he had sought since that day in the valley stood before him, cloaked in shadows, carrying justice that no human hand should wield. The rooftop air felt charged, every gust of winter wind carrying with it the hum of something unseen. Michael stood frozen, one hand near his service weapon. Though he knew it was useless, the woman's presence was not that of an ordinary adversary. It was something heavier, as though the world itself bent slightly around her. Her voice came smooth, touched with an accent Michael could not place. Perhaps Eastern European, but softened by years of careful control. "You have been asking questions, Michael, stirring waters that were never meant for you to swim." Her words carried through the air like whispers against his skin, calm yet edged with warning. Michael's throat tightened, his voice rough as he forced words past it. "Who are you? How did you make that shot?" He hated how desperate the question sounded, yet it poured from him unrestrained. She turned more fully toward him, and her face revealed itself in the faint city glow, angular, sharp, beautiful in a way that did not comfort but unsettled. Her eyes were oceans filled with storms, depth that held more years than her features suggested. She looked no older than her 30s, yet her gaze carried the burden of centuries. "The impossible shot was never impossible," she said, stepping closer with movements so fluid they left no trace of sound. "It only seemed so because you think like a soldier, bound to the straight line, bound to the laws you were taught to never question." Michael shook his head. "Bullets travel in arcs. They obey gravity. They strike what is in their path. They do not curve through stone or wait for time to align." Her smile then was faint, patient, the smile of a teacher facing a stubborn child. "You assume the cause must always come before the effect. That distance is a wall and not a veil. The bullet did not move in the way you imagine. It traveled through folded space, and time itself flowed around it like water around a stone." Michael's pulse hammered, his instincts screamed, but part of him could not turn away. He stared as she reached in her coat and drew out a rifle. At first glance it looked ordinary, black steel glinting faint in the rooftop lights. Yet when she lifted it higher he saw the truth. The barrel shimmered with a strange inner glow. The scope was no simple glass, but a swirling galaxy, stars and patterns spinning endlessly within. The stock was etched with symbols Michael did not recognize, equations that seemed to hum in rhythm with the very air. The entire weapon vibrated with a sound too low for ears, more felt than heard, like the vibration of earth before a quake. "This is not a weapon of war as you know it," she continued, cradling the rifle with reverence. "It is what happens when human ingenuity collides with knowledge far beyond its age, when someone refuses to accept the word impossible as a barrier." Michael felt his hand twitch toward his pistol, instinct demanding a sense of control. But she shook her head softly, amusement dancing at the edges of her gaze. "You still think like an agent, Michael, a man bound by rules and papers. Do you really think your weapon has meaning here?" He swallowed hard, his voice cracking despite himself. "Then what are you? What kind of person bends bullets through concrete? What kind of person bends time?" She stepped closer, the city's hum falling silent around her. "I am what happens when someone decides that justice does not bow to distance or to time, that when the world refuses to act, I will." The child lived because Victor needed to die, and I was in the only place where both truths could exist. Michael's chest heaved, his thoughts swirled. But why show yourself to me? Why leave traces? Why reveal any of this? "Because some shots require witnesses," she said, her tone neither kind nor cruel but firm. "Because certain truths must live in memory, even if they can never live in official files. And because one day, Michael, you will face a moment when the laws you cling to will fail you. And then you will remember, impossible is only a word that means it has not yet been done." The wind tore across the rooftop then, carrying fragments of her words into the night. Michael felt the ground sway beneath him. Not from the gust, but from the shift inside his very being. The rigid frame of his world, the structure built by physics and discipline, was cracking. She raised the rifle once more, her hands moving along it with practiced grace. To you, this is a miracle. To me, is simply application. When you cease to see rules as walls, you see only pathways. Her gaze pierced him, steady and unwavering. That is the difference between you and me. Michael stepped forward, anger pushing past fear. That is arrogance, that is playing with powers no one should hold. You're no agent of justice, you're something else entirely. Her eyes softened, but did not waver. Perhaps justice has always belonged to those willing to act when others cannot. She walked toward the very edge of the rooftop then, her silhouette sharp against the churning sky. The casing in Michael's pocket felt like fire, as though it yearned to return to her, as though it knew its maker. She turned her head one final time, her hair dark as midnight against the glow of the city. Remember, Michael, some truths you carry alone, some you carry because no one else is willing. And when your moment comes, you will understand why I showed myself to you. Then she stepped backward. Off the edge, her body seemed to vanish, not fall, swallowed by shadow and silence. Michael lunged forward, eyes wide, his hands gripped the ledge. Below lay only the street, empty, no body, no trace, only the sound of the wind whispering between buildings. He staggered back, the rooftops spinning around him. The casing still in his pocket burned with unnatural weight. The city below bustled, unaware that above it laws had been broken, truths rewritten, and justice delivered by hands that bent reality. Michael knew then that his life had been cut in two, the world before the impossible shot, and the world after. And nothing in either world would ever be the same. 3 weeks passed, yet the rooftop encounter clung to Michael like a shadow that refused to fade. His days became a blur of paperwork and hollow conversations. The case labeled unsolved and buried under official seals. The reports reduced the impossible to bland phrases. Unknown shooter, undetermined position, threat neutralized, as though ink on paper could erase what his eyes had seen. But the truth lingered, pressing against his ribs every time he breathed. He carried alone, because who would believe him? Who could? He sat in his apartment late into the nights, the files spread across his table, pages scattered like shards of a shattered mirror, each fragment showing a piece of a nightmare, but none of them forming the whole. The casing never left his side. It rested on his desk by day and on his nightstand by night, gleaming faintly whenever light touched it. Its weight grew heavier with each hour, as though it carried not just brass and copper, but the burden of questions. It whispered to him in silence, reminding him of the rooftop, of her words, of the weapon that hummed like a star in her hands. Sleep became a stranger. Dreams haunted him. He saw bullets curving through impossible air, weaving through barriers as though stone were mist. He saw shadows folding around angles that could not exist. He saw time stretch and bend, moments unraveling like threads in the hands of a weaver who knew the pattern better than the cloth itself. Each time he woke drenched in sweat, his sheets tangled, his chest heaving, the taste of metal bitter in his mouth. Robert called once or twice, his voice thin over the line. He admitted he was still running calculations at night, still checking angles, still feeding the data into programs that returned only the word impossible. He laughed nervously when he said it, but Michael heard the tremor beneath. Robert, too, was breaking beneath the weight of knowing. Emma buried herself in science, publishing nothing, telling no one. Yet Michael knew she was chasing something in the data, trying to reconcile what she had seen with the laws she had trusted her entire career. Sophia dug deeper into reports, convinced there was a hidden organization, a force behind the woman on the roof. But her searches led only to silence. Michael found no comfort in their struggles, because his burden was heavier. He had seen her eyes, he had heard her words, and she had chosen him to carry the memory. He sat one evening staring out his window at the endless sprawl of city lights. The casing in his palm felt warm though the room was cold. He remembered her voice, calm and unshaken, Some shots require witnesses. Some truths need to be remembered. He wondered if she had chosen him for his skill, or for his doubt, or simply because he was there. The thought unsettled him more than any calculation. Each sound in the night now made him tense. Each shadow seemed heavier than it should. He felt watched, though he saw nothing. The sensation was not threat but evaluation, as if unseen eyes measured his choices, waiting for the moment when he too would face the impossible. The city carried on, unaware that its laws had been broken, unaware that distance and time could bend at the will of someone who walked among them unseen. People hurried to their jobs, lights flickered on in windows, children laughed in parks, and Michael wondered if somewhere above them another impossible shot waited to be fired. One night he found himself back at the rooftop, the December air colder now, the wind sharper. He stood at the same ledge where she had vanished, staring down at the streets far below. Nothing had changed, no sign remained. Only memory. The skyline stretched before him like a canvas, painted with endless lights, beautiful, fragile, fleeting. He whispered into the night, though no one could hear. What are you, a protector, an assassin, an angel of death, or something that does not fit any word we know? The silence answered with the rustle of wind against stone. The casing burned in his pocket. A reminder, a promise, a weight he could never lay down. Michael knew his life had been split clean in two. There was the time before the impossible shot, when the laws of the world were clear, firm, unyielding. And there was the time after, when he had seen with his own eyes that rules could bend, that justice could be delivered by hands that existed beyond reason. He would never know why the child had been chosen to live, why Victor had been chosen to die, or why he had been chosen to witness. The questions gnawed, but the answers would never come. Perhaps that was the point. Perhaps some mysteries were meant not to be solved, but to be carried. And so he carried it. The memory of crimson mist exploding from Victor's head. The child's eyes filled with desperate faith. The rooftop figure with galaxies swirling in her scope, and her words that lingered like embers in his mind. Impossible is only another word for not yet done. As he stood beneath the cold stars, Michael accepted that he might never see her again. Yet he also knew that somewhere, out there in the folds of distance and time, she still walked, her rifle in hand, waiting for the next moment when justice demanded what no ordinary hand could deliver. And when that moment came, whether tomorrow or years from now, Michael knew the world would again tremble under the weight of the impossible.